and welcome to Viewpoint. My name is Volodymyr Solohub, and right now I'm joined by the Deputy Speaker of the Ukrainian Parliament, Ms Oksana Syroyid. Madam Deputy Speaker, welcome to Viewpoint.
Very good to see you.
Ms Syroyid, let's start with the hot news of the last week. Last week, the Ukrainian Parliament failed to pass a number of laws which were required by the EU for liberalizing visa-free regime and granting the visa-free for Ukrainians to travel to the EU. And the most crucial, according to the EU points which the Ukrainian Parliament failed to pass, was the so-called sexual discrimination, sexual orientation, non-discrimination provision in the Labour Code, and a number of corruption fight, the laws which were designed to fight with the corruption. Let's start with this most controversial issue, the sexual orientation, non-discrimination provision. Why did the Ukrainian Parliament in general fail to pass this law?
I think that this very sensitive issue has to be first discussed in the public. You know, it's very easy to blame politicians, but I don't remember too much time devoted, for example, by the TV channels on explaining people why it is so important and why it's not that harmful for anybody or any beliefs or religion or whatever feeling. And that's why I think that is the responsibility of everybody to not being ready for this particular amendment. And I don't see any problem. Ukrainian society is very tolerant, but nobody took care to communicate it properly, but somebody did care to throw this amendment right to the plenary. And I don't think it was good.
So what are you saying is that the MPs did not vote on that because they were concerned that the people, the Ukrainians, were not too much familiar with what this provision will do?
Absolutely. This is, society should be ready. You cannot vote something like this and split society in part. Because, of course, there are lawyers who understand the legal nature of this, but there are people who have their own perception. And this is responsibility of everybody to communicate it properly.
So would you say there was some speculation with this provision, claiming that this provision will allow same-sex marriages in Ukraine, which totally Ukrainian society does not accept, whereas the legal nature of this provision was not properly communicated? Absolutely.
We have nothing to do here with this problem. This is just a speculation. And I think we have to care to work properly on the wording of this amendment, and we have to care, everybody has to care to communicate it to people. So
how long do you think this discussion needs to take place in order for this provision to be adopted?
I know that now the draft law, the draft code is submitted for the second reading, so it's now for the preparation for the second reading, and the amendment definitely will be debated during this period of preparing for the second reading. And I think we have to work in a good faith here to do it properly in all directions. First of all, to provide the best wording, so prevent for speculation, and then to talk to people again.
But it doesn't seem that Ukraine has too much time on this. On November the 10th, the delegation of the Foreign Ministry is traveling to Brussels to present to the European Commission the progress of Ukraine, of the Ukrainian Parliament, the Ukrainian government on implementing the list of laws which were necessary to get the visa-free regime. And it seems like the delegation doesn't have much to present because nothing has been adopted.
Well, I think here we have to concentrate more on other issues, because this is very important, but still it's kind of manipulation.
It was very controversial.
And it was manipulative, while very more important issue where, you know, the attention from them were distracted. And first of all, this is the fight against corruption and so-called anti-corruption legislation. When we speak about anti-corruption legislation, we have to understand here that the EU didn't provide us the list of the law that has to be passed to get this visa liberalization. The EU, and it's normal, provided us with the benchmarks, what Ukraine should perform before get visa liberalization regime. And here I have to say that unfortunately the draft laws that were presented to the parliament, they were, even though they had very nice titles, very often they didn't provide in a substance for this fight against corruption, and that's why the parliament was reluctant to vote for this.
But who is to blame for the parliament getting the inadequate laws?
Unfortunately, we have problem with the quality of the legislation coming from the cabinet, and we communicated it quite often that the legislation coming from the cabinet should be of better quality, and this is exactly the case. We understand that the machinery of government, the civil service in particular, is very much weakened. Actually, it's destroyed, and I understand the challenge in front of the cabinet and in front of the government, that it's very difficult to get the capacity to develop this good quality law. But still, it doesn't give the excuse. I personally, I want to vote for something that I know will not be abused, especially if it refers to the fight against corruption. For example, as it comes with this agency, whether good or bad to have the agency that will withdraw the assets.
The agency on the recovery of assets which were obtained by corrupt practices.
Absolutely. Whether good or bad, absolutely it's good. But to prevent this agency to head the corruption and to chair the corruption in this area, we have to bind this agency by law, to provide the specific scope of authority for this agency, to provide clear instruments of accountability of this agency, to provide the clear mechanism of how those assets should be recovered and managed. If it is there in the law, then I understand that this agency will work in good faith.
Yeah, but Ms. Syroyid, what is the problem with the Ukrainian parliament? Why cannot the parliamentarians, their staff members, work on these draft laws in a timely manner? The draft laws were sitting in the committees for weeks, and then at the last moment, some changes were introduced, and obviously the parliament didn't want to vote on that. So what's the problem with the timing?
There is no problem here. There is legislative procedure. So the law, when it comes at the draft law, to the parliament, we have the first reading, and only after the first reading we can start working on this. But even working on this is limited because, for example, I cannot amend the structure of the law. If it has been submitted in this structure, I cannot change it. I have to work only with this structure. That's why it's a limit of scope of work. But still, the MPs did a very good job. And I believe that this law now is of a shape that can be adopted. And I believe that this week the legislation has been passed.
Ms. Syroyid, some of the political analysts say, and we're again talking about this law on the agency on recovery of assets which were obtained by the corrupt practices, say that the MPs were so reluctant to vote on this law because they were afraid that it would target them and their assets which were obtained in a corrupt way. Do you agree with that?
I have no doubt that it can be the case, but not with all the MPs. Of course, the parliament is, structured in a different manner. Yes, we still have those MPs that are dependent on the oligarchs, and of course, they most probably they are afraid of this. But there are MPs who are acting definitely in a good faith, and I understand that they understand the threats of the abuse of power under this legislation. So I don't think that this generalization of the reasons should be only done in one way. I think that more deep analysis should be done.
And Ms. Syroyid, very, very briefly, if possible, as we discussed on November the 10th, the delegation of the Ukraine's foreign ministry is traveling to Brussels to present the progress of Ukraine on passing the laws, which obviously they have nothing to present. But also on November the 10th, the Parliament will reconvene again and will be voting some other laws on anti-corruption laws. Is there hope that Ukrainian Parliament will manage to pass these laws and that the EU Commission will proceed on the pre-approved schedule?
I can speak on behalf of myself and the Samesex faction because we are discussing very close all those problems. And I believe, and we believe that, of course, the passing of those laws it's very important to prove to the EU that we are working in favor of visa liberalization. But I also believe that but more important for the Europeans would be if we would manage to dismiss the Prosecutor General and to prove, for example, the transparent procedure of the appointment on the administrative position in the prosecution. And here I believe that the efforts will be way more evaluated by the Europeans, because it would be the real evidence of the efforts of Ukraine in the area of fight against corruption.
Well, Ms. Syroyid, many thanks for this very interesting insight, and many thanks for finding the time to come and talk to us. This has been Volodymyr Solohub for Viewpoint, together with the Deputy Speaker of the Ukrainian Parliament, Ms Oksana Syroyid. Thank you for watching us.